The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it's Monday in a Riv. And I don't know whether to start the show with Jailhouse Rock or The Beat Goes On. I don't know. Well, I guess we're not going to talk about much else except...
well, no, because remember, today started early voting day.
Oh, early voting.
I voted this morning.
Vote
early, vote often.
Vote early and vote often. That's right. But... I'll tell you, it's just, it just goes, no matter where you go, the supermarkets, the hardware stores, it's the topic of conversation. I know it's happened to you, it's happened to me. We get approached by people talking about the council, this and that, the mayor, and it just never ends. And this article in the Boston Herald, I think, is a really, really great place to start because, it's so true. Fall River Mayor's latest indictment, the latest coup for Andrew Lelling. And it's funny because this was on the front page of the Boston Herald.
Yep.
And he begins to say that allegedly rip off a bunch of well-meaning investors, a scheme called Snow Owl. Better, it should have been called Snow Job. I love that one. I got to just hit a couple. You guys can read the article because I don't like reading to you. We like to talk about stuff. But there's a couple things that I think are really important to remember, because it just goes to show about politics. It talks about, it says, he could have told a judge that he was poor and put out loans, but if we would have got free education like they wanted, it might not have had it. All kidding aside, one thing is clear about the latest crackdown on political corruption and crime in Massachusetts, and that is that that U.S. Attorney Andrew Lelling means business. Lelling, a career prosecutor who was appointed U.S. Attorney in December 2017, has done more to combat corruption and drug crime in 4 months than Attorney General Maura Healey has done in 4 years. While Healey, the state's, quote, chief law enforcement officer, unquote, has been busy suing President Trump, Lelling has been racking up one criminal success story after another. And that's the problem. Politicians and politically elected people, especially when they're all fundamentally from one party, regardless of the party, this is the problem. They don't do their job. They politicize everything, even when it comes to this. And, crime is crime, should be prosecuted. Maura Healey sues the president. That's nothing more than a political move to make all the Trump haters in Massachusetts happy. You look at Rhode Island, and they're running their campaign for governor about Alan Fung being a Trump fanboy, which has got nothing to do with being a governor of his state. It should be what kind of administrator you are. But this is the problem, and I had to get this in, CJ, because I want to segue into. I always watch Full Measure on Sunday. They have some great exposés about, government misspending and mishandling. And please, if you can, watch it. They may re-air it tonight. I know they do re-air it on Channel 10 in the evening, Sunday evening. I know. After it's on Sunday afternoon, and they may re-air it again, but if not, try to get it on demand, Sunday's episode, because they talk about all the senators and congressmen who've become multi-millionaires after getting into office with insider trading and all the other things, but they get into it specifically. But the thing that really gets me is a comment made by the individual who's doing the story, because we've said this on the show numerous times. One of the problems that we have with these people, and they're not all like that, and they said there are people who go to Washington that are there to do the work of the people, which I think is a rarity, but they admitted there are some. But they talked about people who've made upwards of $100 million while they've been in office with investments and other things, and they go over it. But what they said was the problem is that they make their own laws. And it's true. How many times have we said that politicians make their own rules? We can't get the judges out because the judges ruled our attempt to elect judges. They said you had to get a constitutional convention. Our state legislature doesn't care what we say. We vote, even though our Constitution says they are at all times our agents and answerable to us. Even though we tell them we want a reduction in the sales tax, they give us the finger and they just rule whatever they want. They give themselves pay raises while we don't get a sales tax holiday. And they just fundamentally, you and I, if we do anything, we go to jail. We get arrested. We get indicted. We lost our job. But if you're a politician, you can get to exercise your right to politicize. And now we've ended up in our own community with a mayor who refuses to leave regardless of the damage he does to the city. Why? Because now we're going to debate the charter, we're going to debate due process, even though it's totally irrelevant. Any man with any degree of ethics would have said, I'm doing too much damage to the city. Even though I'm innocent, I know I have due process. I know I'm presumed innocent, but I'm doing too much damage to the city. I will step back, devote my time to clearing myself, then come back and give everybody the finger. But no, not our guy, not our guy. And there's a few articles about it. So this is what, watch, by all means, watch Full Measure, because they tell it like we have been telling you for a long time. That's why you gotta drain the swamp. You've got to vote people out. Politics should not be a full-time career. It was never intended to be an occupation. Our forefathers put down their printing presses and shut off their printing presses. You know, put the horses in the barn, put the plow in the barn, picked up their muskets and created a nation. Then they served and went back to their jobs. They didn't make a career. This is something that we have done. We have made politics a lifetime endeavor, and we've gotten all these euphemisms about, I'm a public servant, I love to represent my people. Well, represent them for a term or two, and by the way, when we tried term limits in Massachusetts, what happened to that, CJ?
They shot it down again in the courts.
That's right. Our politically appointed judges, shot down our ability to limit people's terms. So, you know, and unfortunately, I was never in favor of term limits, but obviously when the people aren't bright enough to get these people out, you have to do something. For most of my life, I was adamantly opposed to term limits. But then when I see somebody getting elected time after time after time after time, they're corrupt, they do nothing, and then they say, oh yeah, I know, but my cousin knows him and I can call him for a favor maybe. So get all the other congressmen out, get all the other state reps out, but I want to keep my pet state rep. You know, and that's the problem. It's terrible, but you know, we truly get the government we deserve.
That's like keeping a pet rock.
Yeah. Well, we truly do get the government that we deserve.
It's true.
But please, read this article in the Boston Herald. You know, get on your computer or your phone and pull it up, or or buy the Boston Herald if it's available. Read this article. It's pretty good, really good.
And you know what was very interesting. You had mentioned about Jasiel not stepping down and we can't get him out, and it's about all these due process and whatnot. The Herald News did a poll. 2,200 people responded. 76% of those people want the mayor to step down. 76% out of 2,200.
Yeah. And the other 24% The other 24% either have a job that he got from him or one of their relatives does, or they're related to him.
Right. So it just goes to show that, you know,
That's the largest margin, you know, a mayor had, I mean, that's larger than any mayor in recent history has ever been elected by. The largest one I can remember was Flanagan by 70%.
Right.
So, I mean, more people, and like I said, but a total disregard. Just like our state representatives, our federal, they have a total disregard for what we want. And they just go about their merry way, make their own rules, and he's going to say no, absolutely not. And they're going to cloud and muddy the water, talking about that disaster that we call a charter, about, you know, like some, you know, and they're going to continue with that ridiculous thing, like somehow by him saying and removing him because of the negativity he's bringing to a city that's already looked upon in a tremendously negative light, not understanding the fact that certain jobs, perception of the individual in charge. When a CEO steps down because he doesn't want his company to go bankrupt because his stocks are going to toilet, they're doing the right thing, you know? But they don't do the right thing. And when they don't do the right thing, we muddy the water by talking about, oh, he's innocent. Nobody's saying he's not innocent until proven guilty. Nobody's saying. Obviously, it's a constitutional right to due process. Nobody's saying it. But what we're saying is, like a man accused of child molestation can't stay in charge of a daycare center, like a district attorney who's charged with murder can't be effective as a district attorney. We can't have a mayor, especially in a city like this that's got, I mean, so many problems, a litany of problems. We can't have a mayor that refuses to leave office and then say in the next breath, I love Fall River. Yeah,
well, that's kind of like the statement that every politician's making right now. I love Fall River, I love Fall River. But, you know, what's very interesting is 27 years ago in Pawtucket, a city very similar to Fall River, they had a mayor who was indicted.
Yeah.
He was indicted.
Yes.
And he was indicted for receiving a bribe. And before, the mayor's name was Brian Serault, I believe.
Yep.
And the city council basically boxed out Brian Serault. They took away all his power. But he stayed in office. He refused to step down. And you know what happened when he refused to step down? The judge gave him more time. Okay? At Serault's sentencing, U.S.
More time in jail. Let's
right.
not, so they don't, our audience doesn't confuse. He gave more time in office.
No, they gave more time in jail. At Serault's sentencing, U.S. District Court Judge Ernest Torres added 9 months to the federal sentencing guidelines, sentencing Serault to 66 months. The added time was for the harm he did to Pawtucket by staying in office while awaiting trial.
The harm he did in office. And you know what gets me about this article? I'm reading this, and it's really funny to see a tale of two cities and, you know, alternate universes. And this is a quote from Ray Houle, the council president who became acting mayor. With a quote, within 4 or 5 days, Ray Houle was in the mayor's office and Brian was out. Brian Serault, that is, to clarify. We didn't even allow Brian Serault into his office. We had a police officer at the door, unquote. Now, isn't that irony at its maximum? They had a police officer keeping this mayor out of his office, and we had a police officer keeping him in his office.
Right, right. And, you know, again, this is very similar to Fall River.
Yeah. Well, Pawtucket's the Fall River of
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island.
Yeah, I call it Patoilet.
And that's one of the kind of names it's referred to as.
Yeah, and, you know, the thing is, Serault didn't resign as mayor until the day after he pled guilty in the U.S. District Court. He ended up serving 5.5 years in federal custody. Now, the thing is, he did the same thing this mayor's doing. I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm going to prove I'm innocent. He kept saying that. And then he was found guilty. And he tried to stay in office. But again, because he stayed in office, he got more time. So maybe the same thing will happen to Jasiel if he gets convicted. The judge will say, hey, you know what? You've done a lot of harm to the city of Fall River. We're going to add a year or two onto your sentence.
Well, you're right.
We should be so lucky.
Well, I ran into one of probably the 76% who was in that poll at a at a local store, and he basically said, well, look, innocent or guilty, most likely when the feds bring a charge, it's irrelevant. He's staying in office because he wants his $10,000 a month.
Right.
That's why he's staying in office. And you know something? You may have a point.
Yeah, and he may need that $10,000 a month because guess what? An attorney wrote a letter to the editor of the Fall River Herald saying that he may not be able to use his defense fund money.
Yeah.
Under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 55, Section 18E, the statute clearly states that the fund may be created to defend against a criminal matter that is not primarily personal in nature. And this mayor has gone around saying, what? It has nothing to do with my job as mayor. Nothing to do with my job as mayor. So,
well, he's guilty of that. He's guilty of saying it's primarily personal.
right.
Because he said, I never did anything as mayor, which it says primarily, not solely. But I still feel he did something wrong as mayor because he did file a fraudulent tax return while he was mayor. And granted, the funds that were misrepresented in that tax form maybe were not public funds. But he was still the mayor. And as the mayor, as people told me when I used to rail when I saw somebody who had a public job, the headline is always firefighter arrested, police officer arrested, school teacher arrested. And the response was always the same to me. Even though I've always said I've never seen plumber arrested or electrician arrested. They just say, you know, a Fall River man was arrested for whatever crime, but if they're a public employee, I will now echo what they've always told me when I railed against that. They have to be held to a higher standard.
Right.
And who should be held to the highest standard in the city?
The mayor should be held to the highest.
What public official? The mayor, the chief executive officer of the city.
He should be held to the highest standard of all.
That's right.
And whether people like it or not, that's just the way it is.
And I know that obviously somebody has asked for a legal opinion.
Yeah, the Herald News asked for one, and we asked for one as well. I'm sure that OCPF will be providing that shortly, and when we receive it, we'll be sure to bring it to you here on Spindle City Straight Talk.
Well, and you know something, I hate to be, you know, I don't want to seem pessimistic, but I'm not pessimistic. I'm a pragmatist. I'm fairly practical. You know the OCPF.
Yep.
They're semi-political. It's like appealing something to the Ethics Commission. When have you ever seen a real finding from the Ethics Commission?
Never.
They always find some way to tiptoe around it and protect the people who ended up getting in those jobs. I don't know if I hope the OCPF actually comes down and says that it clearly states and gives us a sound fundamental opinion. But my feeling is they're probably not going to rule. They're not going to make a ruling that is unfavorable to a politician. And
well, what will be interesting is that
and then in order to necessitate this, because as I said, they make the rules, you'll have to litigate their interpretation.
Right. But, you know, what's going to be interesting is if they say that he can't use this money for this defense, and he's already spent some, he's going to have to pay it back into the account.
Yeah.
And how can he pay? You know, if he can't use this money, that's $76,000.
And I can tell you one thing, he can kiss bye-bye to his lawyers.
Yeah, $76,000 that he's not going to have.
They're gone. You know?
That's $76,000 he may not have. That's a lot of money.
Yeah,
Okay.
He'll have to get Groucho Hoppo and Zeppo. They might do pro bono work, but I don't think Reddington is going to do it. But
no, when you consider that Reddington usually takes a $150,000 retainer.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's just the start.
That's just
to open his door. By the way, give me $150 grand to walk in my office. So.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
It'll be very interesting.
And the council vote to remove Fall River Man may be delayed again.
Yeah, that's because Derek Viveris is on vacation this week, and he says it was planned a year ago. And I'm gonna take him at face value that it was planned a year ago. Derek was very willing to answer my questions via email. He even provided his phone number so that I could call him and speak to this issue on the phone with him. But he did say that the vacation was planned over a year ago. Obviously, if it was planned a year ago, he couldn't foresee this issue coming up. But I have to give Councilor Ponte some credit here, because he says he believes that all 9 councilors should be present to take a vote on this. It's not that they should be present. They have to be present. You need 7 councilors to say get out of office.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm in a way, I'm a little sorry he said that, because who knows? The Twin Towers, the Camara twins,
Yep.
who are, by the way, no relation. I have no relatives with the last name Camara. So if they have the last name Camara, except for my son, I have no family relatives outside my son. So they will probably take turns not showing up at a meeting until this whole thing is over.
Right.
Because their objection, and I like this article because it says, you know, with Corporation Counsel Joe Macy opined, that means gave an opinion, it would not be appropriate action for the council to take, in spite of the fact, they're going to hang their hat on it, in spite of the fact that we had a former corporation counsel and an attorney, our attorney from the recall, say they felt it was appropriate.
And Joe put the
I
digs into
also
him.
spoke to 2 other corporation counsels, well-respected attorneys from other communities, who in deference to them shall remain nameless, but they both opined that it was, after reading the charter, it was totally okay for them to take that action, because the motion said a temporary. It was to temporarily remove the mayor, and that's what the heading, contrary to what self-appointed corporation counsel of the charter, Mike Mioza, said. It was a totally appropriate action. And you know something? As far as I'm concerned, they can only, they should take that. They should take the no confidence vote, as I said on the last show.
At least that.
And they should take a vote as to who wants him to resign, because the public really needs to know. They really need to take that action. And you know something? If our corporation counsel feels it's not appropriate and they take that action, let somebody litigate it, because that's the problem. They want to turn everything into a sideshow rather than dealing with the fact that the mayor is doing a disservice to this community by remaining in office and not resigning. That's the bottom line here. That is the bottom line, and a vote of no confidence is not addressed in the charter. And to object to that showed that obviously these councilors
We're on the take.
are on you know, they've got issues, you know, they don't want to go on record. And, you know, if they don't, they violated their constitutional duty to us. As the Commonwealth of Massachusetts says in part of the first Section 5, which I read on the last show, and I'm not going to read it again, they're answerable to us. And making an objection and abstaining is not an action. You're an elected official. We have a crisis in this community, and I want to know. And, you know, frankly, I don't care if you go on record and say, I think he should stay in office. Well, then you'll suffer the consequences of that 76% at the polls next year. But I'll tell you what, 76% out there, if they never take a position on this, anybody who doesn't take a position, there can be no Switzerlands. You better not vote for anybody who doesn't take a side. Pick a side. I won't vote for you, but at least I'll respect you enough that you stood and said what you truly felt. We're going on record. He shouldn't be in the office. You know, he's doing a disservice to this community by making this thing into a 3-ring circus. How can any business be done in Fall River when every single day this is all we talk about? This, you know, you go to the market, you go to the hardware store. I don't know about you, CJ. Every single place I walked into, somebody talked to me about this.
Oh, everyone's talking about it. This is the conversation.
And how
in the
can
city
we
still.
do any business for the city? How can the city move forward? I mean, it's a travesty. And You know, any city councilor, as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't weigh in, and like I said, I don't care what side they're on, but you gotta take a side. You gotta pick a side. You gotta have enough courage to pick a side, otherwise you don't belong in that seat. Because this is a critical stage in Fall River. We've gotta, you know, we have to do this. There's an old Japanese samurai proverb that it is always better to take arrows in the head. And fundamentally what that means is you face your enemy and you die with honor. You take the arrows in the head, not in the back. So stand up and tell us what you feel, because you're our representatives. And if you don't feel the way you should feel, well, you're going to suffer at the polls. And is this why you're trying to duck it? But you're not doing yourself any favors. I have heard more negative comments about those objections and the ridiculousness that followed than any other thing. And I will remind Councilor Steve Camara of one thing. All I've got to say to him is, because not the first time he's obstructed things, I'm going to say one thing to him. 1995. You know what 1995 was? CJ?
No, I don't.
That's when Steve Camara was the president of the city council, and they had what was referred to lovingly as the Portuguese mafia.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And 5 city councilors were voted out.
Yep.
Including its president, Steve Camara.
Yep, I remember that.
Remember, the public will ultimately react. Maybe they're kind of slow, but when you abuse your power and you won't take a stand, or you ramrod stuff through, there will be consequences. So my message to you is 1995.
A day that will live in infamy.
A year that will live in infamy.
I'm telling you, it just gets to be so ridiculous because, like you said, we can't go anywhere without hearing about this. People aren't talking about Fall River in a positive light. Those people that are talking about Fall River in a positive light are zombies. And I mean, I'm finding them all over social media because, you know, behind a keyboard, everyone's, you know, hey, Mom and Dad, get me the Hot Pockets. I'm a badass on Facebook. And it just doesn't get any better than this. It really doesn't.
Already worse.
Yeah,
Depending
already
on your
worse.
Perspective. No,
Now,
you're right. And,
now,
you know, the people who are defending him, they have every right to think, but I mean, they have no basis. Because, you know, rather than say he's innocent until proven guilty, which isn't even a part of this debate.
That's right.
Whether they say that he's entitled to due process, which is a constitutional guarantee. If they just said, I don't really think that him staying in mayor is hurting the city, as ridiculous as that would seem to the average person of even a modicum degree of intelligence, they're entitled to that opinion. They're entitled to that opinion. But at least the opinion would be just, they would admit it was an opinion. Don't start quoting charters and laws that are totally not applicable. This is about a perception. This is about a job where perception is just as important as performance. As I said, you know, have somebody that has pending charges for child molestation try to open up a daycare center and get a license. Try to get a DA to stay as DA if he's been charged with murder. Doesn't happen. That's just the way it is. Have a CEO of a company accused but still innocent until proven guilty, and a right to due process. Movie actors, CEOs, private and public sector, movie moguls, all resigned. But not our mayor.
Nope, he's too good for that. He's too good for that.
Hey.
He loves Fall River. He loves Fall River.
See you Wednesday.
See you Wednesday.
I got a pretty good idea. We'll be talking about this on Wednesday, the day after the council meeting.
I think so, too.
Have a good one.